Aria Santos was a poor widow with 4 kids, drowning in debt and 12 days from eviction when she stumbled into a warehouse and saved a dying Mafia boss's life. What happened next changed everything she thought she knew about survival, family, and the man who would burn his empire to protect her. The humid August air in Miami clung to her skin like a wet blanket, thick enough to taste, thunder rumbling somewhere over the ocean as neon signs reflected off rain-slicked asphalt. The warehouse door swung open at 11:48 p.m. Aria pushed through, her beat-up scooter abandoned outside in the rain, holding 7-year-old Lily against her chest. The child was sobbing, her small body trembling, clutching Aria's stained delivery uniform like it was the only solid thing in a crumbling world. Aria's left eye was swollen completely shut, purple and black and angry. Handprint bruises circled her throat in dark finger-shaped marks. Blood dripped from a split in her lip onto her shoulder. She stumbled forward 3 steps and froze. A man lay on the concrete floor in a pool of blood spreading like oil across the grey ground. His expensive black suit was soaked crimson. His dark hair was silvered at the temples. His breathing came in shallow, wet gasps that sounded like drowning on dry land. 2 men in tailored suits crouched beside him, guns drawn, heads snapping toward her in unison. "Don't shoot," Aria rasped, her voice broken like shattered glass. "I have a child." The wounded man's eyes fluttered open. His gaze locked on Lily's face, and something broke across his features. Recognition. Impossible grief. Hope. His lips formed a name that hadn't been spoken in 5 years. The name caught in his throat like a prayer. But what Aria did not know was that the terrified child she had been protecting for 3 months at the shelter, the girl who called her mama in whispered prayers at night, was this dying man's daughter. The child the entire city believed was dead. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming tomorrow. Now let us go back to the beginning, to 14 hours earlier, when Aria Santos had exactly $200 in her pocket and an eviction notice that would destroy everything. The morning had started like every morning for the past 3 years. Aria woke at 5:33 a.m. in the cramped apartment on 8th Street, the one with the broken air conditioning and the ceiling stain that looked like a crying face. She lay in darkness, listening to her youngest daughter, Sophia, coughing in the next room. The sound made her chest tighten. Sophia needed medicine. Sophia needed a doctor. Sophia needed things Aria could not afford. She sat up slowly, her body aching in places she no longer had names for. 28 years old but looking decades older. Dark circles hung beneath her brown eyes like permanent bruises. Her hands were calloused and cracked from double shifts at the diner, from cleaning houses on weekends, from wringing out every last drop of her will just to keep her 4 children breathing. The eviction notice sat on the kitchen table where she had left it, the words printed in brutal red ink. 12 days. The courthouse stamp meant it was real. The landlord meant business. In 12 days, she and her 4 children would be homeless. She pulled open the kitchen drawer and counted her money again, though she already knew the number. $200. That was all. That was everything. $200 to last until Friday when she would earn another $117 before tips, which meant $40 after taxes because the owner at the diner skimmed everything. $200 to buy food for 4 children. $200 to keep the lights on. $200 against a 12-day countdown that was already eating her alive. Mama. Her oldest son, Diego, stood in the doorway rubbing his eyes. He was 9 years old with dark eyes that had learned too young how to carry worry. "Is the bad man coming today?" "No, baby," Aria said, pulling him close, breathing in the smell of his hair, the only thing in her life that still smelled like innocence. "The bad man is not coming today." It was a lie. The bad man, the landlord, was coming in 12 days. The countdown was already written in the air between them. She made breakfast from the last of the rice and black beans, stretching the portions across 4 plates so each child got something that resembled a meal. She braided her daughter Maria's hair with her fingers because the comb had broken last month and she couldn't afford a new one. She tied Diego's shoelaces with a triple knot because one of them had come loose. She wiped Sophia's mouth and reminded her to take the over-the-counter cough syrup, the cheap kind that probably didn't work but was all Aria could manage. By 8 a.m., the apartment was empty except for Sophia, who stayed home because she was too sick for school, and Aria, who grabbed her delivery scooter keys and her uniform and headed out into the humid Miami morning. The scooter was held together with prayers and duct tape. The seat was cracked. The engine made a sound like a wounded animal trying to run. But it was hers, and it was how she earned her $200 every 2 weeks. She had bought it used for $800 she didn't have, putting it on a credit card she was still paying for, interest compounding like a curse that would not lift. She pulled up to Santoro's Deli at 9:15 a.m. The owner, Marco Santoro, was already setting up the lunch specials. He was 63 years old, had owned the deli for 28 years, and was one of the few people in Miami who treated Aria like she was more than invisible. "You look terrible," he said, not unkindly. "You sleep?" 2 hours, Aria said, tying on her apron. "Sophia's sick again." "The cough." "The cough." Marco pulled a container from the refrigerator. "Take this. Soup. My wife made it. It's got chicken in it, rail chicken, and garlic. Tell your daughter to eat." "I can't." "You can and you will," Marco said, pressing it into her hands. "This is not a transaction. This is what people do for each other." Aria felt her eyes burn with tears she couldn't afford to cry. $200. The math was always the same. Food, rent, electricity, water, medicine, school supplies. $200 split 6 ways. The numbers never added up. They never would. The delivery shift started at noon. Aria climbed back on her scooter and drove through Miami's humid afternoon, delivering sandwiches and soup and pasta to office buildings and construction sites and the homes of wealthy people who lived in a completely different world from her own. She had delivered to penthouse apartments where the kitchen alone was larger than her entire apartment. She had seen closets filled with clothes that cost more than everything she owned. She had watched women her age, women who were not widows, who had not lost their husbands to a drunk driver, who had not spent 3 years crawling through the dirt of survival, complain about the thread count of their sheets. At 4:08 p.m., as Aria was returning to the deli to pick up the evening shift orders, her phone buzzed. A text from Sophia's school. Sophia had called the emergency contact number. Sophia was asking if someone could come pick her up. Sophia was frightened. Aria's heart dropped like a stone into black water. She called the school. The teacher explained that Sophia had a fever of 101.4 degrees. That she was crying. That she needed to see a doctor. That she couldn't stay at school. Aria called her mother, but her mother didn't answer. Her mother never answered anymore. Her mother had made it clear 3 years ago that she was done helping, done supporting, done believing in Aria's choices. She called the only person she had left to call. "Marco? Can I? Sophia's sick and I need to pick her up and I'm so sorry but..." "Go," Marco said before she could finish. "Pick up your daughter. Don't worry about the shift. I can't afford." "You can afford it because I'm not paying you less. Go. Pick up your baby." The drive to the school felt like it took a century. Rain had started falling in heavy sheets, the kind of August rain that turned Miami's streets into rivers. The humidity was unbearable. The smell of wet asphalt and decay hung in the air like a warning. Sophia was sitting in the nurse's office looking smaller than usual, wrapped in a school blanket that swallowed her whole. Her face was flushed. Her eyes were glassy with fever. When she saw Aria, she started crying. "I was scared," Sophia whispered. "I called and you didn't answer and I was so scared." Aria held her daughter close and thought about the hospital bill she couldn't pay. A fever of 101.4 meant a doctor visit. A doctor visit meant money she didn't have. The math kept happening, over and over, a problem with no solution. She took Sophia home and gave her more of the cheap cough syrup. She put a cool cloth on her forehead. She held her hand until she fell asleep, and then Aria sat on the edge of the bed and did something she hadn't allowed herself to do in 3 years. She cried. Not quietly. Not the kind of tears that could be hidden or swallowed. Real tears. The kind that came from a place so deep inside her that she thought she had buried it forever. Tears for her dead husband. Tears for her for children who deserved better than this. Tears for the 12-day countdown that was already halfway finished. Tears for the fact that even if she worked every single day for the next 12 days without sleeping, she would never earn enough money to stop the eviction notice. She would never find another apartment she could afford. She would never keep her family together. The apartment was so quiet you could hear the rain against the windows, steady and relentless, like a clock counting down. Aria wiped her face with the back of her hand and looked at the eviction notice on the kitchen table. 12 days. That was all she had left. She didn't know that in 14 hours, her life was going to change in ways she could never have imagined. The rain fell on Miami like a curse, steady and relentless, turning the streets into rivers of reflected neon. Aria Santos sat on the edge of the bed in her one-room apartment in Little Havana at 6:47 in the morning, watching her daughter Sophia sleep, watching the fever flush across the child's small face like a warning nobody had heeded in time. The girl's breathing came shallow and quick. 101.4 degrees. That number lived in Aria's mind now, repeating like a prayer that had stopped working. She looked at her phone. 3 missed calls from delivery requests last night. 3 orders she could not complete because her scooter chain had snapped somewhere on Southwest 8th Avenue and the repair shop wanted $200 to fix it. $200. That was almost everything she had left in the world. Aria stood and moved to the kitchen, careful not to wake the other 3 children sleeping in the only bedroom. Miguel, 14, his breathing rattled and thin from the asthma that was slowly stealing his life. Sophia, 11, burning with fever. Carlos and Rosa, the twins, 8 years old and still young enough to believe their mother could fix anything. She turned on the kitchen light and the cockroaches scattered like refugees, disappearing into the spaces between the walls where the mold grew in black fingers. The apartment was so humid the walls seemed to sweat. Everything smelled like burnt coffee and something older, something like surrender. In her pocket, exactly $200 in crumpled bills. Rent was due in 11 days now. 11 days left before the red ink deadline on the eviction notice taped to the refrigerator door. She had read it so many times the words had stopped meaning anything. Her eyes just saw the numbers now. $22,000. August 23rd. Or the streets. But that was not the worst number. Miguel's surgery cost $200,000. The collapsed lung, the doctors said. Untreated asthma for 14 years because they could never afford the inhalers, and now his body was shutting down one piece at a time. The hospital bill was a stack of papers 3 inches thick, each one a small death sentence. She had asked about a payment plan and the woman at the billing desk had looked at her with something that was not quite pity. It was worse than pity. It was the look someone gives you when they have already decided you are invisible. Aria made breakfast from nearly empty cupboards. 3 eggs. She split them 5 ways, which meant each child got less than an egg but enough to feel like they had eaten. She toasted the bread even though it had started to show the grey-green color of mold on one corner. The toaster turned it brown and hid what was happening underneath. That was the skill she had learned. Hide what is breaking until it breaks so completely that hiding stops working. At 7:42, she heard Miguel's breathing change in the other room. The sound of him struggling, his lungs fighting for air like a man learning to drown on dry land. She went to him and put her hand on his chest and felt his heart racing, trying to work twice as hard to move air through passages that were closing. "It is okay," she whispered. "You are okay." He was not okay. None of them were okay. By 8 o'clock she had dressed the children and made sure Sophia had water by her bed, and she had kissed each of them, even Miguel, even though kissing him felt like a prayer and she did not pray anymore. Prayer was for people who believed God was listening. Mrs. Chen lived in apartment 3B, just downstairs. 72 years old, her hands shaking from Parkinson's, her apartment smelling like the jasmine tea she drank every morning. She had agreed to watch the children while Aria worked. Not for money. Aria could not pay her. Mrs. Chen watched them because 3 years ago, when her insulin ran out and the pharmacy wanted $400 for a vial, Aria had given her every dollar she had made that week. $38 in crumpled bills and the kind of look that said, "You are not invisible. You matter to me." Some people remembered that kind of thing. "Sophia has fever," Aria told her, handing over the bottle of cheap cough syrup. "If it goes above 102, the neighbor has ice. Keep a cloth cool on her forehead." "I know, sweetheart," Mrs. Chen said. "I have raised children. This is not the first fever I have seen. I will be back by dinner," Aria promised. She rode the scooter to the community shelter, the one in Wynwood where they kept children who had fallen through every hole in the net. The engine sputtered and coughed like it was sick too. The seat was held together with duct tape in 3 places. She had spray painted over the tiers so many times the paint was thicker than the fabric underneath. At 8:47, she walked through the doors of the shelter. The playroom was pale yellow, bright in a way that felt too hopeful. Toys sat in plastic bins, most of them broken, missing pieces. But the children did not seem to notice. Children adapted to broken things. Children were good at that. Lily sat in the corner, alone, her dark curly hair tangled like no one had brushed it in days. She wore the same pink dress she had worn for 5 days. When she saw Aria, her face transformed like a sun coming out from behind clouds. "Mama Aria," the child called, running across the room. Aria caught her, lifted her, held her against her chest. The girl was tiny, maybe 6 years old, maybe 7. It was hard to tell with children who had not eaten properly. Malnourishment made them seem smaller than they were. "Hello, little one," Aria whispered into her hair. "I missed you." Janet, the shelter director, pulled Aria aside. She was in her 50s, grey threading through her blonde hair, her eyes carrying the weight of 1,000 small tragedies. She spoke quietly so Lily would not hear. "Still no one has come forward," Janet said. "No missing persons report. No family claim. She has been here for 2 months and it is like she does not exist. Like she fell out of the sky." "Where did she come from?" Aria asked, though she had asked this question before and never received an answer. "She will not say. Just says there was a fire and a man with a scar and that she ran. The rest?" Janet shook her head. "The rest stays locked inside her." Lily had nightmares. Every time Aria brought her home on the weekends, using tip money to pay for the extra food, the clothes that actually fit, the girl screamed in her sleep. She screamed about the bad man and the fire and something that sounded like breaking glass. But in the daytime, Lily was light itself. She held Aria's hand like it was the only thing keeping her alive. At 11 o'clock, Aria started her delivery shift. She rode the scooter through the streets of Miami, through humidity so thick it felt like drowning in air. The clouds were dark gray, bruised. Rain was coming. She could smell it, that electric smell when the sky is about to break open. Her first delivery was to a house in Coral Gables, a place where the lawns were cut perfectly and the houses cost more than she would ever make in her entire life. The order was $87. A woman in a silk robe the color of seafoam answered the door and handed her exact change. "No thank you. Not even a look." The woman was already closing the door before Aria turned back to the scooter. The second delivery was to a downtown office building. Security took the food from her hands before she even saw the person who had ordered it. She never knew their face. She never knew if they even ate what she had brought. The third delivery was to a motel on South Biscayne Boulevard, the kind of place where people checked in by the hour and did not want anyone to know they were there. A man opened the door in a tank top that showed tattoos running in every direction like a map of violence. He handed her the exact change and closed the door without saying anything. By 6 o'clock, Aria had made $43 in 8 hours of driving. The rain started falling harder. It came through the holes in the canvas canopy above the scooter seat. It soaked through her uniform. Her shoes squelched with water. The engine stalled twice, and she had to restart it, pumping the ignition over and over, begging it to work just one more time. At 7:28, her phone rang. Janet's voice was high and tight with something between worry and emergency. "Aria, can you come? Lily is having a very bad episode. She keeps asking for you. She will not stop crying." "I have 3 more deliveries," Aria said. "I know, but—" Aria had already turned the scooter around. She had already made the choice that would matter. The shelter was lit up against the dark rain, yellow light spilling from the windows. She could hear Lily screaming before she even opened the door. A sound like an animal caught in something. A sound like breaking. The girl was in the playroom, surrounded by 3 staff members who were trying to calm her, trying to touch her, trying to soothe her, but Lily only screamed louder. When she saw Aria, she went absolutely still. Then she ran. Aria caught her and Lily wrapped herself around her like an octopus, legs around her waist, arms around her neck, face pressed into her shoulder. The girl's body was shaking. "It is okay," Aria whispered. "It is okay. I am here." "A man came," Janet said quietly. "He came this afternoon, asking about her. He said he was her uncle. He said he was looking for his niece. But there was something wrong about him, Aria. Something in his eyes." Ice moved through Aria's blood. "What did he look like?" "Tall. Maybe 40. Expensive suit, but mean-looking. He had a scar right here." Janet touched her own face from eye to cheekbone. "When I told him we could not give out information about the children, he just smiled. He said he would be back." Aria held Lily tighter. "I am taking her," she said. "Not for the weekend. Tonight. I am taking her home." "Aria, I cannot." But Aria was already moving toward the door, toward the rain, toward the scooter. She wrapped Lily in a blanket, held her close, and stepped out into the storm. The rain fell like a warning. As she reached the scooter, a black SUV turned onto the street, headlights cutting through the darkness like twin blades. It moved slowly, deliberately, as if searching for something. As if searching for her. Aria's heart stopped for exactly 1 second. Then she started the scooter and rode into the night. The warehouse door swung open and Aria stumbled through, gasping, her throat crushed with the shape of a man's hands, her left eye swelling shut, Lily clinging to her like they were the only 2 breathing things left in the world. Rain hammered down outside, each drop a percussion of danger, and the smell of salt water and rust flooded her nostrils as her eyes adjusted to the darkness. That's when she saw him. A man lay crumpled on the concrete floor, blood spreading beneath him in a dark pool that caught the single hanging light bulb overhead. 2 gunshot wounds. 1 to the abdomen. 1 to the thigh. His chest rose and fell in shallow, desperate breaths. Aria's mind fractured between terror and survival. She had dropped out of nursing school after Miguel was born, but the muscle memory was still there, buried under bills and exhaustion and the weight of keeping 4 children alive. She knelt beside him, still holding Lily. "Look away, baby. Look away," she whispered to the child, though her eyes were already squeezed shut. The man's eyes opened. Dark eyes. Dangerous eyes. Eyes that went absolutely still when they found Lily's face. "Lily?" His voice cracked like breaking glass. "My Lily." Aria's hands pressed against his abdominal wound, applying pressure, feeling his blood warm and thick between her fingers. She didn't understand. She didn't care. "Stay with me. Don't close your eyes. Help is coming." Her phone shook in her other hand as she called 911, gave the address, gave the description of injuries. The dispatcher's voice was calm, clinical. 7 minutes. An ambulance would be here in 7 minutes if the streets were clear, and they wouldn't be. The rain had turned Miami into a maze. "What's your name?" she asked, not to make conversation but to keep him conscious, to keep him fighting. "Lucian," he rasped. "Lucian Conti." The name landed like a stone in still water. Everyone in Miami knew that name. The name that mothers whispered to keep children obedient. The name that made police officers look the other way. But right now, Lucian Conti was just a bleeding man dying on a warehouse floor, and Aria Santos was the only thing standing between him and death. His hand reached toward Lily with shaking fingers. "They told me fire. I thought, 5 years ago, they said she died in the fire." Aria's mind raced backward, connecting pieces she didn't know she had. The child she found at the shelter 3 months ago with no records, no family history, no name on any database. The nightmares about orange and heat and screaming. The way Lily would go rigid whenever she heard sirens. The sirens came now, wailing closer, and Aria felt something shift in the universe, felt the ground beneath her entire life tilt at an angle that would never quite right itself again. Paramedics rushed in, professional and efficient, pushing Aria aside with urgent hands. They cut away Lucian's shirt, assessed the wounds with the detached precision of people who had seen everything. And 4 line went into his arm. Oxygen mask over his face. Then they loaded him onto a stretcher and he reached for Aria with the strength of a drowning man. "Don't leave her," he said through the mask. "Please. Don't let them take her." "I won't," Aria promised, not understanding but meaning every word. At St. Mary's Hospital, the emergency room was its own country with its own rules and currencies. Aria sat in the waiting area at 12:56 in the morning, Lily asleep in her lap, both of them still soaked in rain and blood that wasn't theirs. The fluorescent lights hummed their mechanical lullaby. Her eye throbbed in time with her pulse. A nurse examined her injuries with brisk professionalism. Swollen shut left eye. Bruised throat with handprints already turning purple. Split lip. Broken rib. "We need to do an X-ray," the nurse said. "And you should stay overnight for observation." "How much?" Aria asked quietly. The nurse's expression softened. She'd seen this before. 3,000, maybe 4, depending on imaging. Aria closed her eyes. $3,000. She had $156 left. She had a broken rib and a shattered life and a deadline that was now only 8 days away. "I can't afford it. Just clean it. Please." The nurse did, with alcohol and gauze and a gentleness that made Aria want to cry. But she didn't cry. Her tears had dried up somewhere on a Greyhound bus 3 years ago when Miguel had taken his first seizure and she realized she would spend the rest of her life fighting gravity. 2 men in dark suits entered the waiting room like weather moving in. Aria recognized the type immediately, the kind of people who existed in a different world than hers, the kind who got what they wanted because they were willing to take it. The first man was in a wheelchair, chest bandaged, the second had his arm in a sling. But both moved with the precision of soldiers, both had the quiet authority of people accustomed to being obeyed. Carlo and Gino. She would learn their names soon enough. Carlo approached first. His eyes moved from her bruised face to Lily's sleeping form to the way Aria's hands were positioned protectively around the child's shoulders. Something shifted in his expression. "You brought him in," Carlo said. "Not a question. I found him. I called an ambulance." "Who did that to you?" Gino gestured at her face. Aria told the story in short, flat sentences. The shelter. The men. The tattoos on their necks. The name that fell from one of them like a curse, Tyler Brennan. Carlo and Gino exchanged a look that was all violence held in check. "The nephew," Gino said quietly, as if speaking to himself. Bold enough to move on the boss directly. A doctor emerged at 2:17 in the morning. Lucian was stable. Critical, but stable. The bullets had missed vital organs by distances measured in millimeters. He would live. He would heal. He would carry scars. "Can I see him?" Aria asked. The doctor hesitated. Visiting hours were over. But Gino said, "She's with us," and the hesitation dissolved. The intensive care unit smelled like disinfectant and machines. Lucian lay unconscious, tubes running from his arms and nose, monitors displaying the rhythm of his heart in green digital lines that rose and fell like a landscape. Aria stood at the foot of his bed, holding Lily, feeling like an intruder in someone else's private suffering. Carlo positioned himself at the door. Gino moved closer, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. He called her his daughter, Aria said carefully. The lieutenant's jaw worked. Lily Conti. She died 5 years ago in a fire at the estate. We never found who set it. His wife died too. Lucian. He paused, searching for words. He went into the nursery after that. Just sat there in the dark, didn't eat, didn't speak. For months. We thought he was waiting to join them. Carlo added quietly, one day he came out and he was different. Harder. Like something inside him had been cremated with them. Aria looked at the child sleeping in her arms, this impossible girl who should have been dead but wasn't. Who should have no name but had found one in the desperate shelter of Aria's heart. She's not dead. No, Gino agreed. She's not. Over the next 3 days, Aria didn't leave. She couldn't. There were men in dark suits guarding Lucian's room, and now they wouldn't let Lily out of their sight. Aria called Mrs. Chen, her elderly landlord, and lied with the fluency of someone who had become fluent in desperation. She was helping a friend through a medical emergency. Could she keep the kids a few more days? Mrs. Chen agreed, though worry creased her voice. The delivery app showed 47 missed shifts. Her account was flagged as unreliable. The $200 in her pocket became $156 after she bought sandwiches from the hospital cafeteria. The eviction notice in her apartment ticked forward, 8 days remaining. Lucian woke on the morning of day 2 at 3:24 in the afternoon, his eyes finding Lily first. She sat at a small table Gino had brought in, coloring with concentration, her tongue caught between her teeth. Then he saw Aria asleep in a visitor's chair, her bruised face turned toward the window, where sunlight fell across her broken skin like accusation. "How long?" he asked Gino. 38 hours, boss." He tried to sit up, groaned, the pain bright and electric. "The girl." DNA test came back this morning. 99.9% match. "She's yours, boss." Lucian's breathing changed. His hands trembled. When Gino touched his shoulder, the lieutenant felt something shift in the man he'd worked for 15 years, felt the armor crack wide open. Aria woke to find Lucian conscious. She stood carefully, approached like you would approach a wounded animal, slow and careful and empty of threat. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like I died and came back," he said, and his voice was the voice of someone being born twice. "Thank you. You saved my life. You protected my daughter when she had no one else." Aria looked at her own swollen hands. "I didn't do anything special." "You did." He gestured at her face. "Who did that to you?" She told him. Men she didn't know. The name Tyler Brennan. A threat delivered with casual certainty. They wanted the girl. They had seemed to want her dead rather than alive. Something cold crystallized in Lucian's dark eyes. "My nephew did this. I don't want trouble. I just want to make sure Lily is safe." "She is safe." A pause. A recalibration. "Because of you." "What do you need?" Aria laughed bitterly. "A miracle. $200,000 in 8 days, or my 4 children and I are homeless." She listed it: Miguel's surgery, back rent, medical debt, utilities and food and survival. Numbers she had memorized because they were burned into her like a brand. 47,000. 200,000 total. 8 days. Lucian listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said simply, "It's done." I'll have it transferred today. Aria stared. What? No. I can't. You saved my daughter. You brought her back from the dead. There is no amount of money that equals that. I'm nobody, Aria whispered. Why would you help me? Lucian looked at Lily, then back at her. Because you're not nobody to her. And that makes you everything to me. Carlo, standing guard at the door, blinked rapidly. When he turned away, his eyes glistened. That evening, a text arrived on Aria's phone from an unknown number. She was sitting on the hospital suite's balcony, watching the city lights scatter like prayers across the darkness, when the message cut through the peace like a blade. You think you're safe? You're not. Tell Lucian to back off, or your 4 kids learn what happens when people cross the Brennan family. Aria's hands went numb. The phone fell from her fingers and clattered on the tile floor, the screen face down, the threat still vibrating through her like a curse that could not be erased. The garden at dawn was already suffocating with humidity, the kind of Miami morning where the air felt like wet wool pressed against her skin. Aria Santos stood barefoot on the stone terrace of Lucian Conti's Coral Gables estate, her phone trembling in her hands as notifications flooded in like a tide that would not stop rising. Gold digger. Scammer. Trash. Her children's school. Her old address. Her face from 5 years ago, thin and desperate, splashed across every screen. Catherine Mercer's press conference had burned through the internet in hours. The video showed the woman perfectly composed, pearls at her throat, speaking with the practiced sympathy of someone who had never struggled a single day in her life. A woman with a history of financial desperation. An elaborate scheme to extort money and position herself in his life. Every word a blade. Aria had spent the night watching her reputation dissolve like ash in water. By 6:36 a.m., the comments numbered in the thousands. Mothers called her a predator. Business analysts questioned whether Lily was even Lucian's daughter. Social media had already written the ending. Aria Santos was a con artist, and soon enough, she would disappear into whatever hole she crawled out from. She sat on the bench and let herself break. Not loudly. Just quietly, the way she had learned to cry years ago, shoulders bent, breath shallow, tears running down without sound. The rain had started even though the sky was still mostly clear, just scattered droplets that felt like warnings. Thunder rolled across the distance, patient and inevitable. Inside the house, through the glass doors of the study, she could see Lily holding Lucian's hand while Sophia and Carlos begged to see the pool. The child who called her Mama. The man who had given her a miracle and asked nothing in return except that she stay safe. If she left now, if she packed the children and vanished in the middle of the night the way she had before, she could protect them from this. She could run. She had run before. She knew how to disappear. But Lily laughed at something, that bright, innocent sound of a child who had never been broken by the world, and Aria understood in that moment that running would destroy both of them. She stood. She made the choice to stay. At exactly 3:16 p.m. that afternoon, Lucian sat in his study with Carlo and Gino standing like sentries on either side of the mahogany desk. His healing body moved carefully, each motion controlled and deliberate, but his eyes were cold as winter stone. He had been on the phone for the last hour with people whose names never appeared in public records, whose power existed in the spaces between official structures. Tyler made his move, he asked quietly. He's at the gates, Carlo said. 8 men with him. He's asking to see you. Says it's family business. Lucian's jaw tightened. He texted a threat to Aria's phone. He threatened her children. Neither man responded. They had worked for him too long to state the obvious. Tell me you've been building the case, Lucian said. Gino nodded slowly. For days of recordings. The warehouse operation. 3 other hits we traced back to him. The financial transfers. We have everything. Federal prosecutors are ready to move the moment you give the word. Then give it, Lucian said simply. The phone in Gino's pocket buzzed. He made a call, spoke 5 words, and hung up. The machinery of justice, set in motion by a man who had long ago decided that his nephew would not inherit his empire, would instead inherit a federal penitentiary. At 7:34 p.m., Tyler Brennan arrived at the gates in a cream-colored Mercedes, his tailored suit perfectly pressed, his gold watch catching the evening light. He wore the confidence of a man who had never faced consequences. 8 armed men flanked him, their hands resting casually on weapons, the way men do when they believe the world belongs to them. Carlo and Gino met him at the gate with 20 of their own. "Tell my uncle I want to talk," Tyler said, his voice carrying the smooth entitlement of old money. "Family business." "He's done talking to you," Carlo replied, unmoved. "Leave." "Or what? You'll shoot me in the street?" Tyler gestured to the reporters still gathered beyond the property line, their cameras hungry for any scrap of drama. "I'm here peacefully. I just want to see my uncle and the little girl who suddenly appeared. Make sure everything's legitimate." It was a calculated move. Cameras meant protection. Witnesses meant he could demand entry without losing face. Lucian, watching from the security monitors in his study, made one phone call. "Do it. Now." At 8:12 p.m., 12 black SUVs pulled up to the estate entrance like a dark tide. Men in FBI windbreakers poured onto the wet pavement, their movements synchronized and absolute. The lead agent, a woman with steel-gray eyes and a federal badge, approached Tyler Brennan directly. "Tyler Brennan, you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, and wire fraud." Tyler's face drained of all color. His mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. "What? You can't, this is a setup." "You have the right to remain silent," the agent continued, pulling handcuffs from her belt. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The cuffs clicked around his wrists. His men scattered, hands raised, no one foolish enough to fight federal agents. Photographers emerged from the darkness, cameras flashing like lightning, capturing the moment the golden boy transformed into the accused. As they loaded him into a vehicle, Tyler screamed, his voice cracking with something between rage and terror. "Lucian! You think you've won? You're nothing without me. This family is mine." The door slammed shut on his voice. The reporters descended on the FBI agents like wolves, shouting questions that no one answered. Within minutes, the footage was live on every channel in Miami. Then across Florida. Then nationally. Inside the study, Gino stood by the window and watched the SUVs disappear into the humid night. 40 years minimum, he said quietly. The warehouse alone is conspiracy to commit murder. The recordings from Tyler's penthouse show everything. "He's gone, boss." Lucian said nothing. His expression remained unreadable, a carved stone face that had seen empires rise and fall and learned to take neither seriously. When Aria entered the study, her eyes were still swollen from crying, her voice barely steady. "You called the FBI." "I've been building the case for 4 days," Lucian said, turning to face her. "The moment Tyler put hands on you. The moment he threatened your children. That wasn't family business anymore, Aria. That was war. And he lost." She stared at him, trying to process the mechanics of what had just happened. "But Catherine, the press conference is next," a new voice said. They both turned. Carlo stood in the doorway, phone held out, showing a live news feed. Catherine Mercer was at a charity gala, bathed in golden light, accepting applause from Miami's elite for her courageous press conference. She wore a white silk dress worth more than Aria made in a year, her diamonds catching the chandelier light like frozen tears. The moment stretched. 3 seconds. 4. Then the ballroom doors opened and FBI agents walked through like judgment itself had taken physical form. "Catherine Mercer, you're under arrest for conspiracy, blackmail, and obstruction of justice." Catherine's laugh was sharp and brittle. "This is absurd. I'm a philanthropist. I sit on 4 boards." The agent held up a folder. "You've been working with Tyler Brennan for 6 months. We have recorded conversations where you discuss discrediting Aria Santos, fabricating evidence, and destabilizing Lucian Conti's operation so Brennan could consolidate power. You accepted $200,000 in wire transfers. That's conspiracy to commit fraud and extortion. Catherine's perfect composure cracked like old paint. She opened her mouth. Closed it. The cameras captured everything, the moment her world collapsed, the moment she realized that cruelty had a cost, and she was going to pay it in federal court. They cuffed her in front of Miami's social elite. Her protests were drowned out by gasps and whispers. The woman who had stood at the hospital steps and proclaimed herself a truth-teller was led away in the same way as any other criminal. The narrative flipped overnight. By 10:56 p.m., both arrests dominated every news channel. Tyler Brennan facing 40 years in federal prison. Catherine Mercer in custody, her reputation obliterated, her position on every board already rescinded. The headlines changed: conspirators arrested in scheme against Aria Santos and Lucian Conti. She was no longer nobody. In the study, Aria watched the coverage with her hands shaking. Her name was being spoken with respect now. Her courage was being celebrated. The cruelty that had flooded her phone hours earlier was being drowned out by a different narrative, one where she was not a predator but a hero. "It's over," Lucian said quietly, standing beside her. "They can't hurt you now." Aria looked toward the next room, where her four children played with Lily near the pool, their laughter carrying through the evening air like bells. Miguel had finally stopped being suspicious and was teaching Lily how to do backflips. Sophia and the twins were building something elaborate with pool noodles. "Safe. All of them, safe. I still can't believe this is real," she whispered. "Believe it," Lucian said. He reached out, his hand brushing against hers, his movement careful and deliberate. "You're not going anywhere. Not unless you want to." She met his eyes and saw something there she had been too afraid to name before. Not gratitude. Something deeper. Something that looked like it might become love. "I don't want to," she said. 3 weeks after the federal agents hauled Tyler Brennan away in handcuffs, Miguel Santos woke from surgery with his mother's hand clutching his like a lifeline. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and hope, a fragrance Aria had stopped believing in months ago. His eyes fluttered open, confusion giving way to recognition. "Mom." His voice was small, fractured, the voice of a boy who had spent too long afraid. "I'm here, baby. You're okay. You're going to be okay." She squeezed his hand gently, terrified to move, terrified to breathe too hard and break this moment. His lung had been repaired. The surgery had taken 8 hours and 40 minutes. The debt, $63,000, was gone, paid in full by a man who claimed he owed everything to the woman sitting beside this hospital bed. Miguel's lips curved into a weak smile before sleep reclaimed him. Aria sat there in the silence, watching her son breathe without struggle for the first time in 3 years. Outside in the waiting room, Lucian Conti occupied a plastic chair designed for people with nothing, his tailored suit worth more than the annual salary of everyone on this floor combined. Lily sat pressed against his side, her small body finally relaxed, finally at rest. Sophia was reading aloud to her, a picture book about princesses and kindness. Carlos and Rosa, Aria's twins, played cards with Gino, who deliberately lost hand after hand and pretended not to notice their grinning manipulation. When Aria emerged into that waiting room, stepping through the doorway like she was crossing between 2 different worlds, Lucian stood immediately. The gesture was so automatic, so deeply ingrained in him from years of power and control, that he didn't seem to realize he was doing it. "How is he?" Lucian's voice was steady, but his eyes were searching hers, reading the answer before she spoke it. "Perfect. He's perfect." The words cracked open something inside her, and suddenly Aria was crying, not the exhausted, terrified crying of a mother barely holding on, but the cleansing, physical release of relief so profound it felt like drowning and surfacing all at once. Lucian crossed the distance between them without hesitation and pulled her into his arms. She felt the warmth of him, the solidness, the way his hand came up to cradle the back of her head like she was something precious and fragile. The children watched this embrace with the focused intensity of young observers cataloguing a shift in their universe. Sophia leaned toward Lily and whispered, barely audible, "Is your daddy going to be our daddy too?" Lily's grin was incandescent. "I hope so." Back at the estate, the rhythm of daily life began to form around the six of them, a cadence none of them had experienced before. Miguel emerged from recovery with his body healing and his guard still raised. When Lucian approached him on the third day, carrying a leather-bound first edition of The Hobbit, signed by Tolkien himself, Miguel's initial suspicion flickered like a candle. But Lucian didn't hand it to him with pride or expectation. He simply sat beside Miguel's bed and said, "I heard you like to read. I thought you might want this one. I read it when I was your age, it helped me believe the world was bigger than my circumstances." Miguel took the book slowly. He opened it and saw the signature, saw the yellowed pages, understood the weight of what was being given. This is too much. "It's exactly what it should be," Lucian said simply, and he meant it. Sophia, age 9, decided within 48 hours that Lucian Conti was a prince from one of her fairy tales, tall, powerful, scarred, carrying secrets like jewels. She interrogated him mercilessly. Where was his castle? Miami. What made him sad? Losing his daughter. Could he fight dragons? He had fought worse. Carlos and Rosa, the twins at 7, treated him like a jungle gym the moment they sensed his injuries were healing. They climbed on him without mercy, pulled his hair, called him silly names, and he let them, never flinching, never pushing them away, just absorbing their chaos like a man who had forgotten what uncomplicated joy felt like. Lily radiated transformation. She called Lucian Daddy and Aria Mama interchangeably, saw no hierarchy, no difference. In her mind, the world had finally corrected itself. She was whole. She was home. One evening, as the house settled into the kind of quiet that only comes with 5 children finally asleep, Aria found Lucian in the upstairs corridor standing in the doorway of the nursery he had preserved for 8 years, a shrine to his daughter, frozen in time the day he lost her. The room was being dismantled. New paint covered the pale yellow walls. A proper bed stood where the crib had been. Lily's drawings, colorful explosions of joy, covered every surface. You let it go, Aria said gently, standing beside him in the doorway. I didn't need it anymore, Lucian replied. I have her back. The real her, not a memory, not a ghost. The real Lily, laughing and fighting and growing. He turned to face Aria, and his expression was stripped bare of every defense he usually carried. Because of you. I didn't do anything special. You did everything. He stepped closer, and Aria's breath caught. These past weeks, you and your kids here, with Lily and me, it feels like a family. A real family. I didn't think I'd ever have that again. I've spent 15 years building an empire so I wouldn't have to feel empty, and it never worked. But this works. You work. Aria's heart hammered against her ribs. Lucian. I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I just need you to know you're safe here. All of you. For as long as you want. No strings. No expectations. This is your home. She took a breath. The words came out before she could stop them, before fear could silence her again. And if I want strings? He went absolutely still. What? I'm tired of pretending this is just gratitude. Or protection. You've been everything to us. To me. Her voice dropped to a whisper, and vulnerability flooded through her like water through a broken dam. I think I'm falling for you, and that terrifies me because you're Lucian Conti and I'm just. You're Aria Santos, he interrupted, his voice low and fierce like thunder. You're the strongest person I've ever met. You're a mother who would die for her children. You saved my life. You brought my daughter back from the dead. You stood up when the world tried to tear you down. Don't ever call yourself just anything. He cupped her face gently, mindful of the fading bruises that were finally surrendering to time. I've been falling for you since the warehouse. Maybe before. I just didn't have the words. When they kissed, it was slow and careful and full of promises neither of them had dared to make. It was the kind of kiss that felt like coming home after years of wandering in the dark. Lily walked in exactly 12 seconds later, squealed with delight so loud it probably woke half the household, and sprinted away screaming, "I knew it! I knew it!" Within moments, all 5 children materialized in the doorway like they'd been waiting just out of sight. Miguel crossed his arms, but he was smiling. "So, are you two, together now?" Lucian looked at Aria. She nodded, her eyes shining. He looked at the children. "If that's okay with all of you." The twins cheered. Sophia clasped her hands together like the ending of a storybook. Miguel said quietly, seriously, "Just don't hurt her. Or we'll have a problem." Lucian's lips twitched. "Understood." The children scattered, leaving them alone again. Aria laughed, bright, free, a sound that hadn't existed in her life before this man opened his warehouse door. Lucian pulled her close, and she rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her ear. "Is this real?" she asked. "This is real," he promised. The cameras outside the estate had finally gone away. The news cycle had moved on to newer scandals, fresher tragedies. Tyler Brennan's trial was scheduled. 40 years, prosecutors recommended. Catherine Mercer's assets were being liquidated to pay restitution and court fees. She would spend the rest of her life in a cell wearing orange instead of silk, her name forever connected to conspiracy and cruelty instead of charity and grace. The world had stopped watching. But inside this house, everything was still changing, still transforming, still healing. Life was quiet now. Normal. Whole. How did this story make you feel? Please leave a comment below and share what is in your heart. If you enjoyed this, hit that like button and subscribe so you do not miss what is coming tomorrow. Share this with someone who needs to hear it.